Wow, here we go. Man, I feel like I haven't gone anywhere in quite some time, so I'm ready to go. Here we go.
Me neither. For those of you who watched the show and may have missed me last week, that's because I was on vacation, which really was to my couch in my backyard and playing with the kids. So that was my
Nice.
vacation. But anyways, welcome everybody, and thank you, Wari. The familiar names. It's so nice to see familiar names. I love it.
Totally.
Um, Welcome to the show, everybody. It's Monday, August something, and it's really great to have you all here. We have a special guest. Oh, the special guest was about to speak.
I was just saying, I thought it was still March. Like, is it like March day, like 365? Like this was
Right?
the entire year of March, and now
That's right. It's like spring break 2020.
yeah,
All
and
of
now, school,
2020.
now school starts, and this is
Exactly. I don't know. So we were just talking about this show alone. Where they're living in the wilderness. I just have like a giant stick, and I'm just marking each day. So it's like I don't know. That's how I'm keeping track. But welcome to the show. So today we have a special guest. He has already spoken and spoiled my announcement of our special guest. But we have Justin Garrison with us. He is a DA, a developer advocate on the container services team here at AWS. I'll let him introduce himself in a moment. But we're going to be talking about some really cool stuff today, and we're going a little bit back to the basics here today. And one thing about Justin, if you've seen any of his talks, which I've seen some of his talks, and he likes to kind of change things up a little bit and not do the norm. So I think it's going to be a really fun session today as we talk about Docker basics and kind of introduction to just getting into Docker. So with that, I think we should probably just get right into it. But Justin, do you want to just say hello and introduce yourself and maybe even explain to the community what Rothgar is? Because I see your handle and I'm like, what is Rothgar? Because me, it's obvious, that's my name. Brent, cool. Brent Containers. He's the maestro of containers. But what is Rothgar?
Yeah, it's thanks for having me on the show. This is super exciting, and as you were saying, like I'm a visual learner, and I used to love Bill Nye the Science Guy. Like he was like as much as possible, and I loved how he explained things with like it wasn't like this is science and this is how it works. It was like here's a giant globe, and we're gonna I still remember he like had like how big is the sun, and he had this huge sphere, and he's filled it with like little Earths, and he's like this is how much bigger it is because you could actually see it. And it's not like, oh, it's a billion times more. It's like, no, I'm going to fill this with a billion of these little Earths, and you're going to see like what actually is going on here. And so like, I love just the visual aids. And like, to me, it helps cement the ideas that it's not like I learn by doing things, but I love to teach by showing things and being able to like cement that with like an analogy of, hey, this is how this thing works, or it's not always perfect. Analogies always are kind of loose, but like storytelling and props are like just how I love to be able to teach things, especially basics. And so it's like with kids of my own, it's like, hey, how does this thing work? I'm like, here, I'll show you. Let's dig into it. And it's a lot of Play-Doh, and it's a lot of like I love those sorts of things. But as you were saying, like my handle Rothgar came from the story Beowulf. It's one of the first known writings of like human existence, basically. When I was in high school, my team was our mascot was the Warriors, and at the time a movie based around Beowulf came out called The 13th Warrior. And in sports, I was number 13, and so I was the 13th Warrior at school, and I played a lot of different sports. But also like I love the analogy of Rothgar and in Beowulf, Rothgar is spelled with an H. For some reason, high school me said I hate the H because it's silent, and so I took it off. So I know it's spelled wrong, but I love the like thought of this king in the story basically sacrifices his life to save his people and be able to like give that like back to all his people to like try to kill this dragon and save his people. It was really fascinating to me like when I learned it in high school, and then I was just like, oh, yeah. It was available at basically every website I went to, especially spelled wrong. So I just kept using it as usernames. So yeah, it just kind of stuck.
Yeah, I was like, my username in like high school was like for AOL Instant Messenger was like Adam9098. Like that was my creativity right there. So as you can see, like I just wanted to get a username so I could start, chatting and putting up away messages on AIM. So nice that you actually have a cool story behind yours, you know?
I have older usernames, so we don't talk about it.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. So also, you know, Brent, and you know, last week there was some really good discussion with Pavan. You guys did some really cool security stuff on Kubernetes. You know, this week obviously we changed day to day. The show mixes up, but one thing I thought would be cool is to talk about maybe a website that we have. Maybe.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate. So, if you've been watching for a while, you've probably seen a few videos. Maybe you've been wondering, how do I get back to see those videos again? Maybe you have a question about something that we said or whatever. So we actually built a sort of a portal of all of our content. It's at containersfromthecouch.com. So you can totally go there right now, and you can start to poke around and look at all the videos that we've shot. In fact, this one is live streaming into it as we speak. So you can totally watch it from there, or you can watch it from YouTube, or you can watch it from Twitch. So yeah, if you want the full chat experience, you definitely want to be on YouTube or Twitch or in the Kubernetes Facebook group that we're in as well. So we're just trying to find you. We're trying to reach out to you and make this stuff as easy as possible for you to find. And so I think this little website is going to hopefully be your go-to. You can check it every day. There's even an RSS feed if you want to subscribe to the RSS feed. So there's all kinds of good stuff. I know, but that's not RSS. So I don't know how you do RSS these days, but I know it's still done.
I think I use, was it Findly? I don't know, but yeah, there's
Feedly, yeah.
Boy.
Also,
words.
I guess it's probably worth mentioning, by the way, this time next week, we'll be doing our special all-day live, all-day event, AWS Container Day. It's the day 0 event for KubeCon Europe. And even though it's KubeCon Europe, we're going to be doing this in the Pacific time zone. So if you check out awscontainerday.splashthat.com, you can see the full agenda. We're going to have a live keynote from Bob. We will be there. Justin's going to be presenting. Adam, do you have a talk?
I don't. My focus that day is going
Slacker.
to be live Q&A. That's me.
That's
you
right.
Get me live, and
that's right. So yeah, definitely join that day. We'll be on Twitch. You'll be able to chat in for any of the live stuff. We're also going to stream into our other locations as well, so you can chat to us live. But for the other sessions, you'll definitely want to be on Twitch there, and we'll be there moderating the chat and answering questions throughout the day. So it's an all-day event to sort of open the doors for KubeCon Europe. It's free. Join. It's going to be great. And then I'm working on another idea for Friday after KubeCon. That just stay tuned for that. Tune back in maybe tomorrow, and I should have some more information for that.
The teaser. I like it. Okay, so with that, the mustache counter is 0 days. Yes, I am sorry to disappoint you folks. I'm now back to full beard. I'm going to do something creative next. Maybe I'll do like mutton chops or something. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
You'd have a pretty good handlebar there. I mean, it connects and everything, so you can.
He did that before the show, like a few weeks ago, and I was like, oh. But then he like, I don't know, he got intimidated or something.
I don't get full connection. I have to use eyebrow pencil to make it look good, and I can't maintain it like that. So anyways, enough of my mustache. I know we could talk about it all day. What I'd like to do is let's get Justin going, and let's start talking about Docker. Let's do the cool stuff. Justin, lead us off. Let's get into it.
Yeah. When I think about Docker, to me, like the the big things about Docker is what it promotes, like how you work with it, not necessarily the tool itself. Like the tool is amazing; it is been foundational for a lot of different things. But I also come from an old school background of sysadmin. We had RPM files and we had deb files, and those were packages of applications. And like how is Docker different than like I just package it up as a deb file and push it out somewhere and someone runs it. And a lot of that came down to me, like the remixability of Docker and the concept of the layers in the imaging, because you can quickly change things out because of those layers. But also like just the way we used to use, Debians and RPMs, or we still use them in lots of cases for sure. But basically you download this immutable thing. Like an RPM is immutable on your system. Like you can checksum it, it's the thing that you wanted. But it comes with like same defaults for everyone to use. Like the Nginx package that I install has an Nginx conf that is runnable, but like it's not going to do what I want. It's not my Nginx. If I want Nginx, I need to figure out Nginx source code and repackage it and do this thing and then package my configuration with it. And I could I could do that.
Yeah.
And I have done that, and
I like that. Not easily. You're right.
in plenty of places, like you package up your Git repo in an RPM and you ship that RPM out somewhere, and that's your application. You ship it with RPMs as your Git repo, and that's how some people do it, and that's fine because that's their immutable thing. That's specialized to their environment. And there's lots of tooling around how Debians and RPMs and dependencies and all that stuff work. But if you've ever written a spec file for an RPM, like it's not. It was amazing for what it replaced. Yes. Absolutely. Like what was before that is great. And then spec files came out. It's like, look at declarative packaging of this thing. And then it got to be a little bit like this is hard to figure out. And it got really configurable and really complex.
There's also, I like your analogy with RPM. There's also like, when you're building that RPM, where are you going to put your shared libraries? Are you going to put them in a place that's dedicated only to the binaries that you're shipping in your RPM, or are they going to go into like a more system neutral place? And if they are you going to break other library versions, for other packages? Like there's all these interwoven, dependencies or decisions that you have to make in that particular circumstance, and it makes it difficult for things to basically stand alone.
Right. And it's system wide, right? So it's like a host, VMs, you can make them smaller, but at the same time, you're probably going to still run multiple things on them. So we got to this point of like, I ship a mutable RPM with same defaults, but then I use configuration management or some scripts on top of it to actually make my, my configuration for that package. So it's like, that's how we started moving in that direction of saying like, okay, well now a machine should only do one app. And then Docker is like, well, why don't we just like package up the machine? And that's where your shared libraries go, right? Like let's just tar up the entire thing. And that's what we move around instead of applications that go on top of it. And there's other things that solve these problems, like snap packages and app image and flatpak and even Nginx packaging. Like they're all different ways of like, how do I make sure my binary has the thing it needs to run? And there's always that I need to depend on something and I want configuration on top of that. So static binaries is a good example, but there's still that like last bit of like glibc is somewhere, right?
Yeah. Do that with Python. Like, that's actually, you can get really close. One of my last startups, we would ship around a file format called PEX. I think it was created at Twitter, and it was basically Python packaged up into the closest thing you could get to a static binary. I think you just needed the Python interpreter, and that was it.
Right. But even like Go binaries and Rust binaries, like some of those still depend on system libraries. Like if I want SSL or if I want certificates, like I need to look at something on the host to make a secure SSL connection because I got to trust something. And there's these pieces that's like a static binary works in a lot of cases, but not always. And if you're going to swap out glibc with muscle or like all these other things of like, how is C running or, how do you package that runtime? You're either going to have really fat binaries that do include everything, or you kind of, mix it up and you rely on some things from the host. And that's where Docker really made it super flexible to say, hey, let's take that application, still reuse those same RPMs, those deb files, we can throw those in the, this container image, and you can customize it right there in the image, and you can run an application. And it's in Docker containers are much more application focused rather than like external flexibility. And again, layers like let you remix these things, which is great.
The other thing about static binaries that I think it kind of goes unspoken most of the time is they're very dependent on pretty much the host that built them, or dependent on the environment that they were built in, and that typically isn't easy to discover from the outside. Like, you have to go and look at, the composition of a build system a lot of times to figure out how a static binary was compiled with what flags and all that stuff. Whereas if you look at doing that with Docker, what do you have to look at? You have a text file that tells you, everything that went into it. And so going and tweaking it and making a change, it's a lot easier. And it's a lot more reproducible across, every environment. Your laptop, this other server, whatever in your data center. You're going to get basically the same result every single time. And I think that's something that is awesome that is, people don't talk about that much.
Right. And there's two places where you can, change that, where one is the image at build time, and I can customize something and easily discover and import things. And the second piece is the runtime, like when I run the container, how is that executed? What sort of environment does that have? And even replacing commands and adding extra file, like those things are available at runtime as well, which again, I think is still just like the power of being able to do this in layers and have that like configuration. I mean, like I could install Nginx RPM and then add a bunch of flags at the end and say like, okay, well now that's my customized Nginx because I added the flags I wanted. But that's still like, yeah, it's hard to discover like how that was done. And maybe it's in systemd, or maybe it's, some other, bash script somewhere that someone's running. And Docker really kind of made that consistent across the board.
Yeah, totally.
And so my thought was when I think of Docker images, like image is the tar file that we packaged up, and a container is the thing that's running, just to set like how we're talking about these things. So a Docker image is before we actually, when we're packaging our application into something we can share with someone else. Again, they're application focused. And so I usually think of, I had the idea last week of like, I think of them as Lego blocks, and I know it's invisible for some people, but like this is like, I can take this Nginx layer from Docker, and I can say, Docker, I want this Nginx layer. And like when you're building your Docker file, like I can say from Nginx, and I just get everything that's like in this layer of a thing. And so this is a default off the shelf image. I can take it from Docker Hub. I can store it somewhere else, and then I can actually do other things to it. Like I can say like, like I actually want to put like build essentials inside my Nginx because like I'm gonna compile some binary, and like it's another layer on top. And Docker knows how to not only do this at build time, doing each layer, but also at runtime. When I run it, I'm going to pull down Nginx. I'm going to pull down this other layer, whatever's published, and then it's going to combine these together and run the command that's in there. And so I actually have a where's my command Nginx. So and like there's a defaults, like Nginx comes with a default command, but I can override that in my own layer, which is super fascinating because it's just that flexibility of like, hey, you know what, like inherit whatever came from Nginx, run it. But if I say like here, like run Apache 2, like it's not going to work. Like I could have that as a command, but if Apache's not installed, like it's just not going to work at runtime. And so it's to me, that's where like this gets super powerful in these layers. Because if I say like, okay, I don't want Nginx anymore, like I do want Apache. So what I can do is literally take off that, put Debian at the bottom, and then I can say, oh, here, wait, like I don't need this build essentials. So here, we're going to install HTTPD. But then I'm going to have to redo it, right? Because HTTP is Red Hat. So I actually want I want Apache 2.
Yeah.
Because that's the problem, right? I do this over and over again. And I'm like, what's the Apache package? Apache 2, right? I'm on Debian. Yeah. So like I need Apache 2, and then I need to run Apache 2 on top of that Debian engine. And like that's the power of these layers where I can just like I wanted Nginx, I tried it. I can run it super easy, and then I can remix these with layers and just add more and more things to it. And it becomes that like super powerful, super flexible. Like I can't do that with an RPM. I can't like say from the, Debian RPM, like that doesn't exist. Like I can't say from the Apache, deb file. Like I can't do those things. But with these layers concepts, like you actually can just easily like, well, like let me replace that. And then, like I said, at runtime, these layers all get smashed basically into one binary. So whatever's at top replaces the thing below it, replaces the thing below it. So if I want to like take something out of it, I can. But then this gets like dangerous, right? Like once I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like build this thing, and then we're gonna install, this is Debian, so we want this side, and then like you get this sort of thing in your Docker file where it's like, oh, like boom, 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 like we're gonna install like 30 packages here, and like
I've seen so many Docker files like that. It's hilarious.
Right. And then like you get like these like single line run files that are like this, and like I have my, oh yeah, by the way, like clean that out, like app clean. Oh wait, sorry, my Legos are all crooked there. Like your Docker files look insane because like you need to clean out that cache and like do all this stuff. And so like you can get super complex with Docker files, but just wait, we're getting to it. But like that's also like how flexible this can be, because I can't do this with a deb file. Like I can't just like take it and remix it easily. And so like I'm gonna switch to just a screen share real fast and like
while you do that, I think the power of the reusability of that from reusing another image, right? It's like the Nginx image, being able to build off of that with Nginx already existing. I don't have to apt-get install Nginx. I don't have to yum install Nginx. It's there, and I just add my config files as needed. So, and then if you need to customize like that, it was really cool to just show the way, like the level of depth that you need to go. You can go there. But you can also start from a very high level pre-built image ready to go. So that was cool.
Yeah. And again, like image basics, like it all starts with that Docker file, right? Like standardizing on Docker files, and things came before this, right? Like make files exist. Make files have been used for as long as I know. Like I've seen some amazing environments that standardize on make files, and I always could reliably go into any repo and say make, and it worked. And that was great. But it's hard to do that outside of one environment or in open source, because it's not standardized.
Yeah.
So this Docker workflow of let's just take a blank file, right? Whoops. Let's go insert mode from Debian, right? And we're gonna say that's our base layer. That's the bottom Lego block, and I want to run a command and I'm going to use the don't worry about syntax, because I'm not going that deep into Docker. I'm just saying the workflow that this promotes. So, hello, right? So that's all I actually like. I'm going to take Debian, and Debian came with a command, right? Like their command was shell. Like I could, if I run Debian without anything else. Oh no, I did it again. I suspended.
You can never get those back.
I know. Hold on. I'm so used to suspending my set, and then let's connect back to that. Yes, I know. Go away. Okay. Nope.
And by the way, Justin's showcasing the really cool functionality with SSM using Session Manager, right? Session Manager, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, that's pretty cool. No SSH.
And now I have a hung Vim right here. So let me remove Dockerfile swap. Okay.
We're going to do it again.
Let's do it again. Debian. I thought about making these files. I'm like, nah, I'll just type them. It'll be easy. And then
this deserves the Doing It Live banner for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, so there's our basic Docker file, and again, I almost suspended my Vim session again there. Okay, so let's get out of it. And again, I can just do Docker. Oh, if I spell Docker right, run. I can run Debian, and again, it's going to pull this image because it's standardized from a registry, and in there, like I'm in a container, like there is a standard command, just a shell here. So just to show that, but then if also pro tip, anyone, export Docker build kit equals 1. If you're not using build kit, you need to. Like it's so much faster.
What does that do?
It's been the newer Docker builds forever. and it adds so many like just nice outputs, and like it's faster, and there's a lot of things that BuildKit can do. So if you haven't been doing that, like run Docker BuildKit.
I haven't been doing that, so I need to see, like, point out the differences when it comes up, because I'm excited about this.
Well, here, let's do this. Okay, so Docker builds hello. So this is our workflow. We made our how we're going to package our thing. Now we're going to actually build that tarball, and it's going to pile up these layers. I mean, I don't have an echo hello, but it's just going to take Debian, and it's going to put my one layer on top of it for echo, a new command. So there's my standard Docker build out. Right? Like, if I do this and run it again, boom, colors.
What?
Look at
Love
that.
it. There's also
I love
looks like
colors.
more lines.
Yeah, it's so in BuildKit also, like if you have multi-stage builds, it'll do, if they're not dependent, they run them in parallel. They do a lot of things that like you'll actually save quite a bit of time in your build pipelines by just exporting that and running it.
How did I miss that?
I don't know why it hasn't been default. I'm sure there's a reason, but I've been running it for years with it this way. So
Years? Good
years,
grief.
like
How did I miss that?
it's amazing, and it's just like that, one of those hidden things. Like I don't know.
We'll have Docker on the show in a couple weeks. I'm going to be sure to ask them, why haven't you folks just made the standard? What's the deal?
Yeah, what's the deal? What am I scared of with BuildKit? Why is that not default?
Exactly. Super cool. I didn't know either. Very cool.
Yeah. Luckily, I'm not the only one. W. Shari says, today I learned BuildKit. That's awesome. And Texan Raj is surprised by it also. So thank you guys.
If that's all you get, that's amazing. That's perfect.
Exactly. But like, thanks for not, hanging me out to dry as the only one that didn't know about this. So that's awesome.
In our build, you can see like here's our two commands, right? From Debian, and we wrote an image here with some crazy long hash, right? So that makes perfect sense. And then we can also run that thing, Docker run, what do I call it? Hello. And instead of getting a shell, I get my standard hello output, because that's what I put as my command. And that's that's just the easy remixability. But there's also other cool things you can do with these layers. Where if Sen is a command line tool. It's another one, like people should look it up. It allows you to inspect these layers. So I can do Sen with my container image name, and I'm using it as an alias. So it actually is packaged in Docker.
Which is another cool thing that you can do, by the way, is have aliases for these things, and then you don't ever have to worry about are they installed or not. They'll just automatically sort of install.
Yeah.
And so this is showing me images on my system right now. And here's my hello latest. Actually, that was the run command. Am I looking at that right? Where's my layers? All right, now my screen's too big, so I'm trying to see if this is right.
I think we need to just have one session where it's like, hey, Justin, just do something on the command line. And I feel like we're going to learn 10 things in that hour. Like, this is incredible. Really cool stuff.
Here it is. Here's my hello image. So there's my ID. It's a SHA image. This was the one that was running because this was the name. And then you can see these layers here where it basically like, oh, this is an old one. I was testing this morning. We'll get into it though. I'll show you that. But this is like what you see here, command bash. Let me add that. So let me go back in here, and other things you can do is add files to your Docker images. Like I can take all of my stuff and just throw it into this container, and it works. So let's say Docker file, which by the way, if you're getting started with Docker, like I highly recommend putting your Docker file in your images because it makes that discoverability easier. Because like you can use labels, you can use a lot of things. There's a lot of ways you can do this, but at some point someone wants to like run your container and then see how it was built. And I have to like, okay, what registry did this come from? What's the user? Did they link it to a GitHub repo? Where does that Docker file exist? And if you throw that in there for someone to play with and explore, it makes that discoverability so much easier for when you're getting started with Docker. I did it at previous companies, and it was just such an easy thing to do. It's just like, oh, everyone could just like cat out the Docker file and say, oh, that's the piece that I want to use in mine. So
that's pretty smart. I like that tip.
You're on a roll today, Justin.
I know, right?
Vim users, did you know :x will write and quit?
Did you
Okay,
know
that I know.
Shift ZZ will do it too?
Yeah, but I always, for some reason, I always do control because it's right next to that shift, and then I suspend, and then I'm just in trouble. And like, but yeah, Shift CZ is also like for those keyboard shortcuts. But yeah, like Control X. So now my Dockerfile has the add. It's going to throw that Dockerfile right in there. We're going to build it again. Colors. Actually, let me do this. Let me remove all my images so that it's easier just to like, if I
That's
Docker,
true. Yeah.
PSA, I don't have anything running. I don't have any images. Yes, no more WQ.
That's right.
Yes.
So far, all
many
I've
keys
learned,
I've saved.
all I've learned is that I know nothing about Docker, but I know a little bit about Vim because I knew I knew how to write exit with X. So thanks.
Yeah,
Oh,
I don't. I
if
can't
you're
tell you how many
watching-
like keys I've saved over the years.
Yeah.
No doubt. If you're watching in the future, W. Shari says Podman does not honor the build kit environment variable from the directive. It has to be Docker IO/Debian.
There are a lot of like those gotchas with Podman that I've used in the past. That's just like it's close enough for a lot of things, and then like really far for like kind of the deeper some of the things that you might try to do. So
yeah.
So if I list out my images again here, I have this hello latest, and now send it's going to pull down again. It should be easier to inspect it. So here's my hello image, and now I can see these layers pretty easily where this is my top layer. That's the tag I put.
That's awesome.
the Docker command prompt. Yeah, I'll show you that one in just a minute.
Yeah.
But this is just in reverse order of the Docker file. The base layer goes first. So my Debian goes at the bottom, and then Docker piles these things on top. And so as the file system sees it, when Docker runs it, it looks from the top down. As I build it, I go from the bottom up. So it's kind of an interesting distinction of a container versus an image, how those work. But you can see here, this is my top tag. Here's my add. Here's my new commands, and it adds a file to it. But that's basically how this image looks now from Docker on a file system layer, and it's powerful because again, any of these layers that are published, I can remix. And so if I publish this hello latest, someone can run that down and then just change it, and that's fine. You don't have to publish these steps in between. Which is also kind of interesting with how Docker works versus RPMs and Debian files, because these aren't going to be like, I can't Docker run, some hash of this image, but I can for those published ones. So it's kind of an interesting way of like, you can do a lot in these layers and push that out there. But without build kit, you need to be careful of secrets. Like if I need to pull something down from Git and I want an SSH key, if I put that in one of these layers, someone can actually go spelunking through these layers and find your SSH key. It's a thing that has exist.
That's interesting. Exactly. It's why I popped it in here, because Techie Stories has been asking about like a couple of questions around security, like how about hardening the containers for security, CIS, etc. And CIS has a benchmark for Docker as well. She's definitely interested in security, and I think we should have a whole show dedicated to that personally. So we should plan that for some time in the near future. But what is it about BuildKit and SSH keys specifically? Like, what does BuildKit do to prevent you from putting an SSH key in one of the layers?
BuildKit allows for secrets, basically, and secrets don't get written to one of the layers. And so it's an in-memory sort of step that doesn't get persisted onto any of these layers. And so you can use your secrets as a SSH key or whatever it is that you're trying to, store in there temporarily for the build process. That won't be published somewhere else. Multi-stage builds also work really well. I can actually show that real fast too. For the, how do I get Docker? Oops.
Oh yeah, Docker PS, the prompt.
Oh, I don't have it in here. It's right here. Just the emoji. Export PS1. I just found the emoji, copy pasted, and stuck it in there. So PS1, if you want some more, that's a deep rabbit hole. That is like a week of series of talks.
Yeah.
But I just like doing it for some of these things. Yeah, the Cube PS1. That's right.
Yeah. Sounds very similar.
If you're using Kubernetes, there's a lot of these things you can just use it and it'll automatically get your cluster and your context and namespace, and that stuff's super powerful. So it's just that little bit of information that's glanceable that I love as like being able to show how it works. So what was I showing? Oh yeah, multi-layer builds. So let's go back into this. The cool thing, again, like I can't do this in RPM. I can do it in Docker where I just add another from. And like it's going to take the first package. And so if I say from, here, let's say this, as builds. And that's going to be where I'm going to build it. This container and all its layers are going to be called builds. It's just whatever name you want to call it. So from, let's say, Alpine. Alpine's another image. It's just a base. It's one of these bottom building blocks that you can pull from. And then I can say copy from builds. Actually, instead of taking it from my source directory, I'm taking it from the container here. So I'm saying take that from the container and I'm going to shove it in serve. Let's just throw it in there. And actually, let's not write a command. So we'll just use the default one. If I don't do another command down here, this is again a new container. So I'm not going to use this command. I'm going to use the command from Alpine. By default, I'm going to inherit that one. So if I build this one, you see I'm pulling down Alpine. I pulled down Debian. Here's my bunch of extra information. So here's my copy. And that's in my second. So here's your stage 1, 2 of 2. So I have build 2 of 2, and it's doing the same thing. It's going to pull that separate. So if I run hello, I'm not getting the Debian based image. I'm getting the Alpine based image. So I can run it hello, and this is going to drop me into a shell because Alpine's defaults is a shell. So I could let's release. See, it's Alpine here. It's not Debian anymore, and I can find my Docker file there. And so I did the same thing again. Super easy to remix. Super easy to kind of like play with these things and just learn with it at a more of an application focus instead of a machine level focus. And
yeah. And I was just, there's a question on the benefits, and I was just thinking, like, imagine all the builds you have to do. You have a lot of kind of all these libraries that you pull in to create your artifact. You can take that artifact and then move it to a lean image in that second stage. And that second stage only has your artifact from that first stage. So you don't have to worry about all that cleanup and everything that's associated. You just have that lean image for your second stage of the build. So,
and getting started, you can, again, make these super complex, like I want my build essentials. I'm going to build my thing here, and then I'm going to pile on OpenJDK comes next. And it's just well, just shove my jar file right in there. And you're like, why does your jar file have wheels? I don't understand what is happening here. And then you're like, well, I need some environment variables. So I need this Docker entry point. And your Docker entry point is a drawbridge. It's, what are you doing here? And at the very end, you're kind of okay, now run my jar as my command. And entry points are override, run something before my command. And so I'm gonna try to see any of that. My toddler's gonna be mad if he knows I labeled all his blocks. But but this is
he's gonna learn Docker.
Exactly.
Maybe. These are things that are it's super flexible, and that is great because you can do this. You can solve a business problem with Docker without needing to build the world from source. I don't need to go find an RPM and rebuild all that source and then package that into another RPM and then tie those dependencies together. It's no, you can shove all these things together into a Docker image. It's going to, layer them together when you pull them down, and you can ship that tarball of your thing that you want and store it in a registry, public, private, doesn't matter. And Docker makes that easy. And that's where that workflow comes in, where like I can build these monstrosities, and I have built some monstrosities in Docker. The wheels are yellow, but this key light, I don't know, like I specifically didn't grab green blocks, and apparently yellow also has problems. So well, yeah, I mean, this is OpenJDK, 11, so of course the wheels are sparkly. So yes,
Yeah, 100%.
but that's like it's just so powerful to be able to do that and solve those problems. And like the very first company based Docker image that I built, like at work, was 60 gigs. Don't do that. Don't do that. But it's okay if you do. Like, we solved the problem of like, we needed to do something. We had an existing build pipeline. I basically wrapped that pipeline into a Docker file and said, okay, now ship it. And instead of shipping a machine, it shipped an image. And we were in a data center. It was a local LAN network. So like 60 gigs took a long time to download, but it works. And once once you build this once, like the next jar file, like you just replace like this, and all these other layers are shared on your host. And so you're not like re-downloading the entire thing to like go over and over again. It's just like, oh, I want to replace this layer, these get shared, and we'll download that piece. And that's, again, how Docker layers really help in some of these cases.
Yeah. Ellie Shari thinks if you had been under 50 gigs, it would have been okay, but 60 is way too much.
But it's go ahead.
I'm trying to remember what the technical limits were back then too, because like I started it doesn't know because you tried to build it. I don't remember what Docker version I was. I originally started on Rails 6, but when Rails 6 was supported, like way back in the day, and then like they dropped Rails 6 support, and like moving the 2.6 kernel was a nightmare for trying to get containers working, because the fundamental building blocks that all this stuff is based on was really getting mature. In 3 kernels and 4 kernels have really gone like, it's like the sweet spot for me for like, I run this in production, like this is okay. And like 5 is really kind of like innovating a little bit more with finding some of those gaps with C groups v2. And there's other things that like newer kernels and newer features are coming by building on those base layers. And that's really important to know that like, this is all built on existing technology, and none of this is new, right? Like, I mean, RPMs push to repos, I pull them down, I run them. Dockerfiles, like tars go up to a registry, and I pull them down and run them. It's just kind of some of that focus and some of those technologies instead of dealing with CPIO. If you ever built RPM files, CPIO based, zips or whatever. Like now it's like, well, these are tars and SHA-256s, so this is great, right? Really powerful.
So Techie Stories wants to know, is there a benefit of using Vagrant with Docker?
So Docker is always Linux. It's the Linux kernel is doing it. If you're running it on a Mac, if you're running it on Windows, you probably have a Linux VM somewhere. Doesn't matter. Like Docker Desktop, like they all do a great job to integrate it so you don't notice. But at the end of the day, there's this Linux VM, a Linux kernel somewhere, or at least an emulated Linux kernel that's doing the thing. Windows containers do exist. They are making a lot of amazing work to make that work natively with the Windows kernel, but Docker Desktop and Docker specifically is like, it's running a Linux VM under the covers. So Vagrant can also be used to package those VMs of like, here's the thing. If you need to ship a lot of stuff with Docker, like you can still absolutely ship a VM to someone. It's going to take a longer time to build because just the process of like booting and running services and all that kind of stuff takes longer. So you might want to look at something like Docker Compose or something that like takes multiple containers and shoves them together, and you can ship that as a text file or configuration to make it more easy to consume.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Worry21 says WSL2 plus Docker Desktop on Windows is awesome. That's good to know. If I ever find myself using a Windows desktop again, I'll look into that.
Yeah, I hear WSL2 is really good. Like, I mean, they ship the Linux kernel with Windows now, and it's just like it's not emulated. You get way faster I/O times and everything else. Like, just increase that performance.
Yeah, I tried to do it on what do we call our desktop as a service offering? Workspaces. But I think under the covers we're running like Windows Server, and I think WSL2 can't be installed on Windows Server or something. This has been a while back, but I remember when I tried it out, I kept running into the fact that it's basically Windows Server and not Windows Desktop, and I was running into problems with that. Um, Mookie Monkey asks, "What's the best way to communicate with the host container?" Interesting question, the way it's phrased, the host container. So, can you talk about that a little bit, or the lack of, maybe?
Well, and that gets us to like the runtime, right? Like I packaged my
Yeah,
image, I did the thing, it's in a registry, and now runtime is how you actually like those containers are different.
yeah,
Those work different, but also a lot of people don't know, but like if you're running systemd, you're running containers of some sort. Like you're running C groups with services, and systemd has these slices. They call them slices, which are basically the systemd version of a container, which is like some sort of like namespace for how you I promised myself I wouldn't say namespace in this whole talk, but I did. But it's a way to isolate that's service from something else. And so systemd is running some sort of container-ish thing under the covers. It's not Docker containers, but it does use those fundamental building blocks from the kernel to say, hey, Apache can use one CPU or this much memory, or it's only available for like reading these spaces. Like those sorts of things are those fundamental kernel isolation layers that make it possible to run Docker. And so Docker runtime, it has different ways to interact with those things and different ways to configure them. But I can go back to screen share and show. There we go. So if I Docker run dnginx, so this is going to pull down nginx from the registry, and D says run it as a daemon, run it behind the scenes. Like I don't want to care about it. So it's again, it made a lot of these things that used to be manual steps, sometimes difficult to discover, easy because it's in a registry, centralized place. That tag name, the nginx piece of it, is a tag which like has a bunch of hidden things under the covers where it's like I can have a URL there of like from containersfromthecouch.com / Brent / nginx : latest. And like that's like under the covers, like this library is the Docker terminology for like their default short name things, but those
right.
short names helped with so much discoverability. Still does. Like that was a great insight to be able to do that. I know there's a lot of places that like wish they could take out Docker Hub, could do different things, and that's Podman is going in that direction. There's other tools that let you do some of that at like a company level. But basically, like Docker is a great developer workflow for like I need to find something and run it. And so I can Docker PS, and I see this gets a little truncated with my terminal, but like that's basically the name of the container I'm running right here, and you
And
can see like
tell us, by the way, like, did you come up with that name?
nope, I could, but by default it generates them. There's actually a really cool list inside Docker source code of like it's always an adjective and like a famous person's last name. So
Nice.
there's been in the past like pull requests, hey, you should add these scientists or these adjectives and remove some. And so it's been interesting. Like I actually tracked that file for a long time because seeing how they would come and go and like, oh, which one am I going to get now?
Not famous enough anymore. Take him out.
I got bumped down. But yeah, I mean, like the columns here, like you get a container ID, which is generated based on a lot of information. You get like what the image you pulled down was or what you told it to run and the command you told it to run. So I could run this again and say, I want to run top. I don't know if top's installed, but we can try it. No, work.
Without
but you can
the
see.
dash D? Oh.
Oh, no. Oh, these are entry points. Sorry. I need to override that. Entry point. Let's do sleep. Let's put it in quotes so it doesn't sleep after for like 2 seconds. 600, 400, sure. Ah, it doesn't have sleep installed. Of course not.
Wow, I'm surprised at
that. It's a lean image, huh?
Must
yeah,
be.
so they trim these down. Anyway, let's just go back to Docker PS because I don't want to waste so much time on that. But you can override this command, which is basically well, in this case, an entry point or a command after the fact, similar to you would with like SSH, where you say like I want to SSH to the host, and instead of running a shell, I want to run, something. You can do that. Your SSH command, Docker took the same sort of syntax, which is great. And then created, when it was created, status gets cut off, but it's up for 2 minutes. This shows my ports, which are ports inside the container, which is, again, we won't have time to go into it. And then that name. So if I wanted to say Docker run Nginx, give it a name, foo. And now I can see I have a foo and a agitated leaky container. So both are running. Both, again, think they have port 80, but also if I look on the host, Nginx, there's a ton of these Nginx commands here. And like what is actually going on here? Because from the host, I have full visibility inside those containers. They're isolated, but I can still see them. So some of these Nginx containers are running in containers, and I actually have some that are standard running on my system. Like I installed the Nginx binary and I just ran it. The main way, at least for Nginx, you can tell is the ones that are running as user Nginx. Those are the ones on my system because it has a user named Nginx, and the ones running as root are running inside the container.
Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize at first is that a container is ultimately just a process running on your system. It's, it's kind of confined to its own location, and it has its own, or it has resources that it can see, inside a tree. But like, other than that, it's just another process running on your system. So you can do processy kinds of things to it if you want to.
Right. And it's like, that is really critical when you're on the host for the security aspect too, where you say, hey, if someone gets to the host, they can see everything, they can do everything. If I can compromise a host, I can run all the Docker commands I want. But Docker also it runs as root, and it has ways to escalate some of that stuff too. So there's issues around how you secure those things. But if I want to, like, this process is one of my containers, I don't know which one, but I could sudo kill. I can kill that process, and if I Docker PS, I only have, so I killed my foo container because I killed the process that was inside of it, and Docker cleaned up, or at least it stopped. It knew that process stopped, so it takes it away from my running list of containers. So from the host, there's no isolation looking down into the containers, but there is for sure isolation from inside the container looking up, which is super powerful. And that's where, like, some of those, how I ship things and how I share resources makes those images really powerful, because it's an application focused runtime that I can override and I can do things with. And one Nginx container didn't affect the other Nginx container on the host.
That's awesome. So there was a question a little bit earlier from RM Raj. Any good book recommendations to get started with Docker? Can you think of any books specifically?
There's a couple that I know authors from, but I've never read them personally, partially because doing it a while ago. There are a lot of really cool Docker playgrounds. So there's Play with Docker. There's a lot of ways to experiment with Docker without, there you go. There's
Play with Docker.
Playwithdocker.com. Is those sorts of environments are great to, like, poke around with things and just throw it away. Like you can mess with things, you can build some images, you can run containers, you can see some things. There are limitations because I can't, like, publicly publish ports and do a lot of things, but I can get the basics of understanding the command line. And really, to me, it's that workflow. It's the, how do you build an image? You push and share the image and you run the image. And then how do you remix that when you want to change it a little bit or update it? And that's the power of Docker. The rest of it is slightly better versions of what came before it, and which is great because that lets us scale a lot more inside of cloud environments and or on-prem and be able to take these things and clone them out over and over again. Like, all of that stuff is super powerful. And that ecosystem around Docker is amazing.
Yeah. And W. Shari points out that apparently they've updated and you can publish ports now and expose routes and that sort of thing. So that's pretty
even
cool.
better.
And there was also a question or a comment from the Shatterpoint. Dive is a great utility for looking at specific image layers and understanding what's in them and efficiencies. So that can be pretty cool too.
I have Dive installed here, but at this terminal size, it was pretty much unusable. But it is really cool because you can, like there's a first column over there, but you can, like, see the file system, basically how it extracts it out. What's on it. So for sure, Dive, if you have a bigger terminal that you can share, it works really well. So
that's awesome. And then let's see what else.
I mean, there's a lot of good chat, but what's nice is everyone was kind of helping each other out in the chat, answering questions.
Yeah, that's true. They were making their own recommendations. There's a recommendation to like go check out a local meetup and stuff like that. So definitely do that. Um, there's a question. I think this is a question. Scallop boat. So I'm guessing, can you use compress to package the build context? Are Docker images compressed at all? Looking for best practices to keep your image as small as possible. So let me take like half a stab at this, and then I'll throw it to you for the actual image piece of it. So one thing is when compression is handy when you're storing your image, and if you're using ECR as your artifact store to hold your images, ECR does compress automatically. So there's that. But then in addition to that, if you're wanting, to compress the image, Justin, how is there any compression already with the image? What's the story there?
Yeah, so the files in the image are compressed. The tar that gets shipped around is compressed. There's actually some really interesting tools that kind of work around that in various ways, like ECR, and I know there's some registries that will like show you an uncompressed version inside of object store. And so instead of like downloading the compressed thing, multiple layers, you just download the thing that doesn't exist. It depends on what your trade-offs are. If you're CPU constrained, you don't want to uncompress this big image. But if you have a big bandwidth pipeline, like you can just download huge images and it doesn't matter. So like downloading them uncompressed also is super valuable. So there is a Docker command called prune, which works similar to like git to like remove layers. It still doesn't make the image necessarily smaller. There's a lot of best practices around putting the image, like making your image smaller, using smaller base images, not putting too much stuff in them, not installing much stuff. I mean, once you get to like this, like your jar file might be a gig in size, so you're not going to get that smaller. On disk, it's going to use tar, and you can change that compression layer or compression setting depending on how you import the images. But you don't really save a whole lot for binary files and things that aren't text. So you're going to save a lot with like a text, but there's things like distroless is a way to like minimize some of these things, but also there's just small base images where you can use Alpine images, you can use BusyBox. There's a lot of things like that try to make those images smaller.
And we actually have a whole show planned on just optimizing your image size. So I'm wondering, Adam, what do you think? Should we do that Thursday? We were trying to figure out what we should talk about on Thursday, but I think that could be a good one, kind of a follow-up to this. So we're out of time for this particular show. Come back, tomorrow. I think I scrolled past there, but the question, but someone was asking, are we having Michael Hasenblas on? He'll actually be on tomorrow. So definitely join in to talk Ursa for EKS. And then Thursday, let's plan to do image optimization. I think that that's come up often enough in one form or another today that it sounds like it would be really cool. But until then, I'll see you guys around.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks to Justin for joining.
Yep. Thank you,
Justin.